Hey everyone, welcome back to RameyWorks 360. In today's video, I'm building and painting the M1129 Stryker Mortar carrier. This one's personal for me because I spent 10 years on this truck and worked every position on it, from driver to assistant gunner to gunner and eventually vehicle commander. It's tight, cramped, and definitely not the best place to sleep. But when you need it, the thing delivers a serious punch. Right away, I could tell this build was going to be different from most armor kits I've done. There's a ton of interior detail in this thing, which also means there's a ton of parts. I started out with the undercarriage and lower hull before moving into the interior. This isn't the most glamorous part of the build, but it lays the foundation for everything else. Once the lower section was finished, I moved into the inside of the vehicle, starting with the driver's area, gunner's area, and the fire direction control section. By the way, that water heater is awesome for making coffee. The FDC computer and radio rack was a bit challenging. Now on to the 120mm mortar and cradle. This wasn't too bad, but it was a little difficult to get some of the pieces in place. Now, somewhere in the middle of this build, my son decided he wanted to help me out while I was gone. As you can see, his colors of choice were red and blue. Not exactly my first choice, but honestly, no harm, no foul. I probably should have locked the door. Let's see if I can bring her back. So I'll start priming with the interior. I use Vallejo black primer. I really like using black for the initial coat because later on, it will really start bringing out the shadows, and you'll see the variation in color. One thing a lot of people probably don't realize is that we actually use these trucks a little differently when I was in Iraq. Technically, this is a motor carrier vehicle, but for our mission, we ended up using it to move the State Department personnel around. To make that work, we actually removed the mortar cannon and the cradle system from the back and replaced it with bench seating. Most days we drive to different government buildings, farms, and villages where the State Department handled meetings and distributed money and supplies. Now, sometimes the locals would even offer us food while we waited outside. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there at 19 years old, halfway around the world, and really trying to take in the culture. It was fascinating, especially to see like a little 3-year-old herding sheep. It's funny looking back now because when most people think of the mortar carrier, they picture firing missions non-stop. But some of my strongest memories from this truck had nothing to do with shooting the mortar at all. I remember we crossed the Tigris River almost every day. And I swear, that river smelled terrible. But right before the bridge, off to the right-hand side, there's a soccer field. Almost every time we went through, there'd be kids out there playing soccer. I don't know why, but that stuck with me. And now for the Zenithal highlight with Tamiya flat white. So if you're unfamiliar with a Zenithal highlight, basically what I'm doing here is spraying a lighter color from above to simulate where natural light would hit the vehicle. The top surfaces get most of the light naturally, while the lower sections and recessed areas stay darker. I also spray from about a 45-degree angle to catch the upper sides and edges. That helps create a smoother transition between the bright top surfaces and the darker lower hull, instead of everything looking flat and monotone. Once the NATO green goes on the top of this, those lighter and darker tones will still subtly show through underneath and help give the vehicle more depth and variation. Even though the effect ends up pretty subtle, it makes a huge difference in brightening the vehicle and bringing it to life. Now, it's finally time for the NATO green. This is where the Stryker really starts coming together. Up until this point, everything has been prep work, assembly, priming, and building up the highlights underneath. But once the color goes down, all that contrast underneath starts to show through and gives the vehicle a much more natural look. NATO green has always just looked right on these vehicles to me. The second it hits the model, it instantly starts feeling like a real Stryker. With the upper hull painted, I move on to the mortar system itself. Next was the 120mm mortar carriage. There's a lot of detail to pack into this section, but once the paint starts going down, all those shapes and mechanical parts really begin to stand out. After that, I moved down to the lower section of the Stryker. I kept the lower hull and side sections a little darker than the top sections to help preserve the shadows and contrast from the Zenithal highlighting underneath. That variation really helps break up the large flat surfaces and keeps the vehicle from looking too uniform once everything is finished. Even subtle changes in tone make a huge difference once weathering gets added later on. With the exterior base colors down, I moved back inside the Stryker and started spraying the interior flat white. Once the white starts going down, all the little details inside really start to pop. This part definitely takes some patience, trying to reach all the tight corners and compartments without overloading the paint. Inside these trucks, every inch of space gets used for something, so there's a lot going on in a pretty cramped area. With the base coat finished, it was finally time to start painting in all the smaller interior details. I started working through the ammo racks, equipment, radios, and storage areas piece by piece. I painted the radios and fire direction control equipment in NATO green to match the rest of the interior components. This section of the truck was always one of the busiest areas since it handled all the fire mission data and communication. It's a lot of small, detailed work, but this is the stage where the interior really starts coming to life. Even though most people probably won't ever see half of these details once the vehicle is close up, I still wanted them there. Even little bits of color like the red fire extinguishers really help break up the white and green inside the vehicle. After finishing up the interior, I could finally start bringing all the sections together. With all the main paintwork finished, it was time to start picking out all the smaller details on the outside of the truck. I started with the Pioneer tools. I used gunmetal gray for the metal, tan earth for the wood, and I used red for the handle. The actual exhaust cover is black, and it also helps break up some of the larger green surfaces. I also added some gunmetal gray tones to the grates and metal components to give them a little more texture and wear. All these little details might seem minor on their own, but together they really help bring the vehicle to life. And here it is at last. To finish everything off, I added these custom resin figures that Solomon over at 11 Charlie Scale Modeling sent me to try out and paint on this MCV build. These figures will soon be available for sale over at legacymodelstudio.com if you're interested in picking a set for your own build. Having spent 10 years around these trucks, it was really cool to finally being able to recreate one in miniature and bring all those memories into the build. I really hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and see the weathering in a full MTC diorama build come to life. And let me know down in the comments what your favorite part of the build was. I'll see you in the next one.